When Glenn and I got married, we had no idea what would happen in our life. We had 3 children diagnosed with PH1.
Primary hyperoxaluria type 1 is a rare, severe disease which over time leads to kidney failure requiring dialysis and a combined liver and kidney transplant.
Major funding for medical stories is provided by Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, Biogen, Transmedics.
So I took him to our local pediatrician and I said, I'm not going home till you figure this out. My baby is dying.
To suddenly think that my child was so sick just absolutely floored me.
Additional funding is also provided by Amgen, Tolmar Pharmaceuticals, Lilly.
When I found out Haley, my little newborn, also had what Colby had, I locked myself in my room, shut the blinds, and held my baby and cried for 3 days.
And by Takeda Pharmaceuticals and Janssen.
Now that we live in southern Utah, we have just a world of adventure right outside our door here. We're so very blessed. My family loves the outdoors. We hike and then we rappel and then we find a swimming hole and go swimming.
Becky has always been a free spirit who loves to play and recreate. Her degree was in recreation management, and she's managed to use her college degree extensively in entertaining our family. Whether it's canoeing, paddleboarding, rock climbing, riding bikes, mountain bikes, motorcycles, quads, anything in the outdoors, anything with adventure and adrenaline. That's what our family likes to do.
We have 4 children. Caleb is our big guy. He's the oldest. He's 24. And he is a great kid, a lot of fun. A great big brother. And then we have Aubrey, who just turned 23. She's our free spirit.
Safety first.
And there's Colby, who's 20. He's a little shy. The kids tease that he's my favorite. And then there's Haley. She came about 5 years later. She's our little caboose, and she's 15. When Glenn and I got married 25 years ago, we had no idea what would happen in our life. My name is Becky, and I have 3 children diagnosed with PH1.
Primary hyperoxaluria type 1, it's a rare, severe disease where the liver produces way too much oxalate. Oxalate is a compound that is produced by the body as part of a number of metabolic pathways, but we also get it from our food. It doesn't really have a major function in the body, and it's primarily excreted through the kidneys. So when you get this massive delivery of oxalate to the kidneys, it results in crystal formation, kidney stones, and even calcification of the kidneys themselves, which over time leads to a decrease in kidney function, and in many patients, even kidney failure requiring dialysis and a combined liver and kidney transplant. It can present any time during life, from early infancy throughout adulthood.
PH is a rare disease. It has potentially very bad consequences for patients. There's something called nephrocalcinosis, where you actually see very widespread calcification in the kidneys. And when you see this nephrocalcinosis, that's also a tip-off that there's one of these rarer genetic causes.
Colby was 5 months old and he was developing normally. In fact, I have a very vivid memory of him on his hands and knees, rocking back and forth, just getting ready to crawl. He was such a cutie. And then at 5 months old, he started getting flu-like symptoms. So I took him to our local pediatrician, and they said he had the flu. And they gave me a syringe so that I could give him sugar water. He was my third child. So I had been through sick kids before, but I just knew something was different with this. So I took him back in 4 times in the next 11 days. They kept sending us home saying that he was sick. Still had the flu, and on the 11th day, I took him in and I said, I'm not going home till you figure this out. My baby is dying.
The most severe cases of primary hyperoxaluria present early on in infancy, sometimes right after birth, where you have an infant who just appears very sick, fussy, maybe they've developed a urinary tract infection with fever. So those kids often have kidney failure very early on and require dialysis, sometimes multiple forms of dialysis, 7 days a week. So it's a very dramatic and extreme presentation.
He was put on dialysis right away to save his life. They said he was a very, very sick little boy. His body was toxic. They didn't know if they could save his life.
One more socket. To suddenly think that my child was so sick, it just absolutely floored me. Being a dad, you're willing to do anything for your child.
Over the next few months, they were just trying to figure out why his kidneys failed. They said they were like the size of a walnut and completely hardened, like they were like a rock. And they didn't know why.
When the kidneys fail, there's no way for the oxalate to leave the body. So it starts to build up in the blood, and that's where the real trouble starts. So you get dysfunction of multiple organ systems. You get cardiac problems, neurological problems, bone problems, eye problems. The list goes on. And that's where the true devastation happens.
They tested both of us, my husband and I, to see if we would be a match, and we were actually both matches. And my husband decided to donate. I remember one of my hardest days was he would throw up all day. And this time I tried to give him his medicine that was so important for him. And he threw it up for like the 10th time. And I remember just slumping to the floor with my baby in my arms, wondering how he was gonna ever make it to transplant. He was ever gonna live long enough because he couldn't keep anything in. Eventually, he gained the 2 pounds needed from 14 to 16 pounds. So finally, he was able to get his transplant from his daddy. And it was pretty incredible, that big kidney in that little tummy.
The biggest tragedies we see, rarely, but it does happen, the cause of their kidney failure has not been diagnosed. And so they go ahead and they get a kidney transplant. And then a few weeks or a couple of months later, they do a biopsy of that kidney, and it's full of calcium oxalate deposits.
So 6 weeks post-transplant, they went in to biopsy the new kidney and already found it full of stones.
So now you've lost that kidney transplant because it should have been a combined liver and kidney transplant, right? Because the liver is the primary problem. So when you transplant the kidney alone, you have not gotten rid of the primary problem, that liver. So that's a major avoidable tragedy. So the typical way it's diagnosed is the pediatric nephrologist will have a patient with severe kidney stone disease or calcifications of the kidney. We call that nephrocalcinosis. And there are a number of biochemical tests that you can do on the urine that can suggest primary hyperoxaluria one way or the other. And then we need to confirm it with genetic testing. It's easier to do nowadays than it was 10, 20 years ago.
It was Christmas Eve that our doctor called us and told us what it was and that our other kids needed to be tested, and that was a big blow.
As you can imagine, it's a devastating diagnosis to give to patients and parents. So primary hyperoxaluria is inherited in an autosomal recessive fashion, which means that the child needs to have 2 abnormal genes, one from each parent, in order to manifest it. If you only have one of the genes, you're considered a carrier.
So both Becky and I were carrying a gene that by itself had no impact, but when combined together resulted in this manifestation of PH1, which was causing all these crystals.
Parents who are each carriers of a single abnormal AGXT gene have a 25% chance with each pregnancy of that child having primary hyperoxaluria. We are really big proponents of testing siblings of kids who have PH so that we can identify them early, because they may be asymptomatic.
Caleb, we found out he was a carrier like my husband and I are, but he didn't have the disease. Aubrey was 4, and she was diagnosed positive with PH1 as well, but she hadn't had one symptom up to that point. When I found out Haley, my little newborn, also had what Colby had, I locked myself in my room, shut the blinds, and held my baby and cried for 3 days until my mom came. She came to town to help us out, and when she walked in the door and I saw that she had been crying, I knew it was even worse for her because she was worried about me and the baby, and I just had the baby to worry about. So I just got it together and said, okay, it's time to stop crying and deal with this.
It was just overwhelming, the thought that possibly you would have 3 kids with the disease that would have to go through dialysis and the medication and the doctor visits and everything else.
Once we know what's going on, we really need to do aggressive treatment. When they do develop kidney failure in the past, really the only treatment has been combined kidney and liver transplant to replace the enzyme and give back their kidney function. And those things do work, but they're big procedures. They're not without potential side effects and consequences.
So they wanted to wait and let him have a little bit of a life and for his body to heal a little bit. His body just needed more time to feel better. He just had been so sick for so long. He eventually got his liver at 5 years old. He got his liver from a deceased donor, a child. Then he started feeling better. And from 5 to 16, he was doing well.
After my liver transplant, I didn't even comprehend that I went through all of that. With my PH1, I think I didn't really understand it until I was older.
I think having my little brother go through all of it was definitely inspirational to me, and seeing how he lived a fairly normal life, I was like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it.
I haven't had any major problems. I've been a little bit worried seeing my siblings having to get kidney transplants.
I got kidney stones in 5th grade, and that was a terrible experience. And then after that in 5th grade, I didn't really have any problems until 2015 when I had kidney stones again. And so my doctor told me that it was time to be put on the transplant list. And so we started that whole process, and he told me that I might have to start dialysis. And I was really scared about that.
For my son Caleb, who doesn't have PH1, I think it was tough a lot because he was 5 years old when Colby's kidneys failed.
So with me not having PH1, I didn't fully understand what was going on. There was one time I remember being in elementary school, and I remember that my youngest brother Colby had gone to the hospital. They'd been gone for a few weeks, and I felt just concerned. I didn't really have a cell phone. I had no way to communicate with them. And I just remember one day at school, I got really overwhelmed and started crying, and I was just like terrified that my brother Colby was not gonna come back home.
It was hard on him. There was a lot of attention given to those three, and it was hard to keep a good balance and give Caleb what he needed too.
Sometimes it just felt like I was kind of forgotten about because they had so much worries and stresses regarding those younger 3 siblings.
One of the primary challenges in primary hyperoxaluria is that the manifestations can be very different even within families where you know the children have the exact same set of mutations causing the disease. And that's very challenging as a physician and as a parent. The traditional mainstay of therapy has been hyperhydration. So what we mean by that is massive water intake. So children drinking, liters of water per day. You wouldn't necessarily think of that intuitively as being a huge burden. But if you ask the families, ask the kids, it's a constant tension in the family.
It was annoying at times for sure. Constantly being told by my mom and doctors, like, drink your water, drink your water. And I was like, I don't want to anymore. Like, I'm full.
Drinking water is good when you're thirsty, but otherwise it's kind of a pain to constantly be drinking water. So we tried to set an alarm on the hour to remind us to drink a glass of water every hour.
The second thing that we traditionally do is we give medications called crystallization inhibitors. So this is typically potassium citrate, which helps prevent the formation of crystals and stones.
Type 1 PH, there is a subgroup, about a third of people, where they have a very specific mutation where vitamin B6 or pyridoxine actually can improve activity of the enzyme.
And reduce the production of oxalate. I would encourage families to seek out expertise and to really feel like partners with their doctor as they go through the management of this condition.
After a year of being on dialysis, I finally got the call that they had organs ready for me, and I did one round of dialysis right before the transplant. And so I have a picture of me kissing my dialysis boyfriend goodbye. It was the last time I had ever have to do dialysis, and I was so thrilled about that I never had to get the blood sucked out of me again. I'd be praying that, okay, this transplant, please come. I can't handle this any longer. And one day I realized that in order for me to get a transplant, that means someone has to die. And that was a weird kind of inner battle that I had, and that was a very strange experience. But eventually I did get my transplant, and I knew that it was the right time for me.
It's like kind of a tricky concept because like I feel bad, I'm humbled, but I'm also so thankful that I'm able to have this second start. I made it.
I am just very grateful for their decision to donate organs, that I can live. And I've tried my best to really take this as a second chance at life and to live a fulfilling life and to do as much as I can and to help other people.
I actually starting the process to give my kidney to Colby when he needed his second kidney. My mom was a little further ahead of me in the process, so she ended up being the one that donated it.
It was so cool to have my mom's kidney, to see their sacrifice and love they have for me. It gives me a connection with my parents that not everyone has.
There are over a half a dozen treatments that are in development right now that I know of. The technology that has emerged and really gives us a lot of hope.
Lots of work to do, but we're happy that we've kind of reached at least the beginning of a new phase, and I think it's very exciting times for our group in this particular disease.
We can't underestimate the power of the patient and parent voice in pushing science forward and advocating for their children. Because at the end of the day, no one cares more about their children than their parents, and they can express that better than anyone.
Getting attention to your disease is going to be very important. So the OHF has really done this, and it's evolved really over many years.
OHF started in 1989. It basically started around a kitchen table with parents looking for answers for their children affected by PH. We now are the largest private funder of research in the world, dedicated to finding treatments and a cure for PH.
They're the ones who help us put it all together and come up with medications and clinical trials to test these medications.
Rare diseases in general are complicated, but PH1 is extremely complicated. And it's complex, and we have to figure it out so that no patient suffers the full effects of this disease. It's an inward disease. Unlike cancer, we don't see the outward effects. And I think when we look at patients with PH1, they're resilient. And they inspire me every single day to get up and do what I do. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
Melissa, come down here.
Jump, Aubrey.
I feel like this experience has shaped us all into better human beings. I mean, it's not easy, and I don't know if I'd choose it again, but I have kids that are incredibly compassionate. They're very aware of people around them and their needs, kind, hardworking, and very optimistic. It's shocking to me how optimistic they are. I have to remind them that, hey, remember, you do have this disease, you have to be careful. And they're like, oh, we're good. We decided to take the advice of one of our doctors and to let them live a great life, because who knows how long it would be.
Sometimes it's a lot of medication, a lot of anti-rejection medication you have to take for the rest of their whole life.
My kids, with an organ transplant, you have a 50% chance in 20 years that you will need a new one. Colby's already had 2 kidneys and 1 liver. And eventually the immunosuppressant drugs do hard things to their body. So we just go day to day and we look around at things we can do. We have done a lot of service projects in our family because we're trying to teach our kids to look outward. They really enjoy living life, and they're great examples to their friends and the people around them on how to still live a good life with a huge trial like this.
Having PH1 in my family has definitely made my family stronger and me personally stronger. I've seen my mom go through a lot, and she's one of my biggest examples. Seeing her crying at night sometimes and just in pain, really helped me realize that I can get through strong things too, and that if I ever need help, I can turn to her. And then seeing my family as a whole, just having all these different struggles regarding PH1, we've all been able to rely on each other, find strength from each other, and just use each other as examples of getting through hard times.
I am hopeful. There's definitely lots of ups and downs with PH1 and many challenges, but I have that hope that I can still live a happy life and I can still find that peace, that joy, and that love with my supportive friends and family. Knowing that everything will be okay. It may not be how I want it to be, but everything will turn out to be okay.
It has made me stronger because I know that I have gone through this and I can help other people to have hope.
I'm a proud father because of who my children are and what they mean to me, and there's just nothing more important than being able to spend time, any type of time, together with them, making memories, just hanging out and doing whatever with them.
Even though it's been really hard at times, I mean, we felt like we were in the depths of hell sometimes. And that I just want people to know that are just starting this PH1 path, that there is happiness to be found in this life.
You got a 5, a 0, whatever that purple one number is.
Well,
He won, like you always say. I lost.
Funding for Medical Stories is provided by Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, Biogen, Transmedics, Amgen, Tolmar Pharmaceuticals, Lilly, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and Janssen.